In case you haven't heard, my name is Jason Torof. That is my beautiful wife, Robin, over there. Yeah, you can cheer for her. She's awesome. So just FYI, I was exercising last night, and you might be asking, Jason, why were you exercising? You're the epitome of physical fitness right there, right? I know, but underneath this, there's room for improvement, I promise. But I accidentally hurt my back a little bit last night. I know, right? So if you see me doing a little bit of this, that's why and everything. But today I want to talk about a love story. Who likes love stories in here? All right. Oh, not as many as I thought, actually. You would think there'd be more based on how many movies they pump out with it. You know, it's interesting, though, because I really find it fascinating watching Hollywood's depiction of love versus what the Bible talks about love. You know, there's some very famous movies that we're talking about here, The Princess Bride, The Notebook, The Titanic, which don't even get me started on the ending of that movie. There was plenty of room on that life graph thing that she had. That was just being selfish. But anywho, you have all of these different movies going on, and if you notice, love looks very similar, right? It looks a little steamy. It looks a little hot and heavy going on right there. Well, with the exception maybe of The Princess Bride. I don't really know what's going on with that image right there. That doesn't look exactly real to me, but there's a lot of different movies that talk about this very superficial type of love with it. And when you compare that with the Bible talks about 4 different kinds of love, and you probably heard of these before. Probably the most famous one in the Christian world is agape love, right? That's the one that Jesus, exemplified the most in his ministry, was that agape love, that sacrificial, self-giving kind of love. But then you have storge, which is a familial love, right? So like the love between like a father and a son, or between siblings kind of thing. And then you have Philia, which is probably the least known amount of love. But in Hollywood, the one that they obsess over and over and over again is Eros, the romantic love right there. And I find that interesting because it seems like every time I watch a movie or a TV show, if one person is being like friendly with another person, 9 times out of 10 they hook up. And I'm like, why can't they just be friends? Like, why is that a bad thing? Why can't they just be friends? It always annoys me. I tell that to my wife all the time as we're watching shows. Can't they just be friends? Kind of thing. But today I want to focus on a love story that is centered around friendship with it, because I do think that there's a lot that we can learn, and we could apply more Philia love in our life with it. When you really break down Philia love, it's a deep, meaningful friendship. It goes much deeper than simple acquaintances. We all have acquaintances, right? I go to people at work. I know their name, and I know what days they show up for work. Those are acquaintances in my life. Philia is much deeper than that. It's a love that binds 2 people together and holds them close through thick and thin, right there. Philia friends are always faithful, and they stay close to you in your best moments and in your worst moments, right there. It's interesting listening to like some famous people. Like I watched a special on Dave Chappelle, and he talked a little bit about his friends. Most of his friends, you don't even know him. I mean, he has a lot of famous friends now because he's Dave Chappelle and he's famous, but a lot of his friends, like, you don't even know much about, kind of thing. And he lives in this, like, actually here in Ohio, I think. He lives in, like, a small town and just knows people by name. Kind of weird. But I want to talk about that sense of friendship, because one of the things I think we can exemplify more in our lives that doesn't really get a lot of attention is friendship with each other. You kind of see it alluded to in Acts 2 when they talk about they met in the temple together and broke bread daily. Like, there was a deep sense of friendship that was going on. But I think in our society, we're so independent, we're so digital and social media stuff going on that we don't really have a lot of meaningful connections anymore. We're great at arguing online about stuff, and we love to talk politics for some reason, which is beyond my understanding, but we don't really have a sense of close connection with each other. And I think it's hard for us to recognize that. It's rare because, at work, when I see clients at work and I talk about their lives, I literally had this conversation with a client who had gone through a really tough divorce, and he was talking just about his life and how he felt like he had no meaning in life anymore. And he goes out with his friends all the time, but there's no connection there. They just talk about superficial stuff, and he just feels hollow inside. He's like, I don't even want to hang out with my friends anymore. There's no point in it. I'm not getting anything out of it, kind of thing. Really powerful stories, and I don't think he's alone in that. I think a lot of us can relate to that with it. And even at church, I remember in my old church down in Florida, it was a decent-sized church. I think it was about close to 100 people, but there were a lot of people I didn't even know their names. I recognized the faces, but I didn't know their names with it, and they probably didn't know mine unless I came up there to speak or something with it. And so I think this lesson is really good because it can help us get more into that mindset of, hey, let's invest in deep, meaningful connections. One of the things that I love that's actually going on today is Ray's hosting this gun thing, which I'm planning to go out for. So be gentle with me, Ray, on that, all right? Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate that, brother. But so what we're going to do is we're going to focus today on David and Jonathan. Probably the best bromance in the history of bromances right there, if we're being honest with each other. So let's start in 1 Samuel 18, and starting in verse 1. So give you a little bit of context of what's going on right before this. This is literally right after David defeats Goliath. It doesn't even matter if you've never looked at the Bible before. Everybody knows that story about how David defeated Goliath. That's one of the most famous stories in the world right there. And so this is right after that. Obviously, everybody's blown away at this point, and they're celebrating. The Philistines are running away in terror, that kind of stuff. And it says, after David had finished talking to Saul, Jonathan became one in spirit with David, and he loved him as himself. From that day, Saul kept David with him and did not let him return home to his family. And Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him, referring to David, more than himself, or as himself, Jonathan took off his robe he was wearing, and he gave it to David, along with his tunic and even his sword, bow, and belt. So you got to remember, prior to David fighting Goliath, he was a nobody. Literally nobody knew who David was, right? Maybe you can relate to that, where you don't show up and nobody even noticed you were there, you weren't even there kind of thing. David was a nobody there, and suddenly all of this is being thrusted upon him. This fame. You have literally the most powerful man in the kingdom saying, "You're staying with me," and his sons "Dude, you are so awesome. Here, take all of this stuff." And I think there's a really good lesson to learn in that, and it's a point that I want to make is, it's important to make other people feel special and important in life. Because when we're able to make people feel special and important, they feel like they matter. One of the most famous slogans around Toledo, we've all seen the signs, right? It's 2 words, "You matter," kind of thing. That's because people really resonate with that message because they want to matter. They want to know that if they were to pass away, that they would have a life and a legacy, and they would be remembered and loved and cherished with it. That's something that everybody wants and everybody connects with. And John is telling David, "You matter to me." It's crazy significant because, giving somebody your robe has a lot of importance in Jewish culture. As a matter of fact, in Genesis 37, you have Jacob and Joseph. Jacob is the father of Joseph. Joseph was the youngest out of a bunch of brothers with it. But Jacob had Joseph in his old age, and so Joseph was really special and important. Joseph was also the child of the woman that he loved the most with it. So there was a lot of deep connection there that he had with Joseph. And what did he do? He gave Joseph his ceremonial robe with it to show that elevation and importance. And we see that here. But not only that, Jonathan is heir to the throne. And he's saying, here, take my robe. What message is Jonathan communicating to David and to the people of Israel? I want him to be the next king. That's how much I care about David, and I'm blown away by David. He should be king right there. Jonathan sees the good in David. And I think a lot of times when we're in our relationships, we're trained to think so negatively all the time. We're trained to point out people's flaws, or when we're doing something, we're trained to criticize and complain about the things that we don't like. And it's easy to do that with people as well. We could start to see all their flaws and all the reasons why we don't like them, that we don't see the good in them, kind of thing. Now, with David, it's easy. There's a lot of good to see with it. But I don't know if you're like me. Sometimes it can be a little harder to see the good in me, kind of thing. And so, like, having that wisdom and that maturity to go, no, people just want to feel loved and special. Let's see the good in them with it. And so, one other important thing to remember about this is David is the youngest of all his brothers. He's the son of Jesse. I forget how many brothers there are, but there's a decent amount of them, kind of thing. The prophet Samuel, he's going to find an heir to replace Saul, which Saul's not too happy about. And he goes to the house of Jesse, and he's like, show me all your sons, because one of them is going to be the future king. I can only imagine how excited Jesse would feel. I just picture Ray, like, let's say Desmond makes it big in the NFL and whatnot, and Ray's just like puffing his chest out like, that's my boy, you know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff with it. Like, Jesse must feel super excited, and he brings out his sons one by one. And Samuel's like, nope, next. I picture like the casting thing, next kind of thing. And finally Jesse's like, that's it. That's all the sons I got. And so, you don't have any more? And Jesse thinks like, well, I do have this one son. That really speaks highly of their relationship, right? But he's forgotten out in the field. He's still tending the sheep and everything with it. And so Samuel's like, well, go get him. And so they do, and they bring him in, and Samuel's just blown away by David. He's like, no, this is the future king right here with it. But you got to imagine from David's perspective, when you grow up in a home where you're forgotten about, you're neglected, you're ignored, nobody thinks you're important kind of thing, what does that do to you with it? Like, that's hard. And you think about a lot of people in life, how many people can relate to that with it? I remember I always hated this as a kid. Always happened to me. We'd go out school, we're in gym, we're going to play basketball, right? So what happens? All the kids stand in line, right? Well, I don't know if you know me or not, but athletics is not my thing, right? So here I am standing, and I already know what's going to happen. Literally everybody else is going to get picked before me. I'm the leftovers kind of thing. And I'm like, I hate sports. Why do I have to do sports? Sports is so dumb. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Because I didn't like how it made me feel. It made me feel unimportant, unwanted, that kind of stuff with it. And so you can only imagine what it's like for David growing up in a family like this where he's not valued or appreciated with it. So here he is now, and Jonathan is giving him his robes, his possessions with it. That's the thing that I love about the Bible is you can read the Bible at a superficial level and you can gain information, but the Bible wants you to think about what you're reading. It wants you to connect pieces together to help solidify understanding of what's actually going on here in life, because all the clues are there. We just have to piece them together kind of thing. So, anywho, now think about your life. Who are the people in your life that makes you feel special and important? I could say Travis is easily somebody in my life that makes me feel special and important. Whenever I'm around him, he gets this big, goofy grin. I get this big, goofy grin. We're both big, goofy guys, so, you know, we just start acting goofy around each other. You know what I mean? He makes me feel really special. But what about you? Do you have someone in your life, outside of hopefully your spouse or your significant other, that makes you feel special? Do you have a deep friendship with someone? You know, I really think, random side note, it's even harder for women. Us guys, I think, we're just big kids, right? Like, what are us men doing? We're going out and we're shooting guns, bang, 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 right? Like, that's what we're doing, kind of thing. We're big kids. But a lot of times for women, they get a lot of pressure of the household responsibilities and taking care of the kids. And now they work full-time jobs as well. There's a lot of pressure on women to just take care of things with it. They don't get encouraged a lot to build friendships with it. That's why I think the women's ministry here is so important, because it encourages those deep connections with each other. I think it's really special what the women have going on here. But you know, I'm not just talking about pretending like you're interested in someone because you want to reach out to them, kind of thing. Because that's very superficial and it's very fake, and people won't notice. They notice it, right? Because once, I've heard this so many times, I've been a disciple for probably 17 years now, I forget. But I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, yeah, people cared and they were so invested in me, and then right after I got baptized, nobody talked to me anymore, kind of thing. Nobody cared. And that really hurt them. That was like a wound in them, kind of thing, because they no longer felt important, like they mattered, kind of thing. And so we're not talking about just pretending like you're interested in someone just so you could reach out to them. We're talking about building a connection because you genuinely want to build a connection, because you genuinely like being around them, because you genuinely see great qualities that you admire and appreciate about someone. You're genuinely interested in them, no matter if they become a Christian or not, kind of thing. You just love them, kind of thing. And when they don't feel that genuineness, that's when people feel hurt and abandoned in life. And that's the last thing that we want to do as Christians with it. So let's continue on with David and Jonathan's story, right? Jonathan, in this next section, he's in a real pickle here, because shortly after that battle that David had with Goliath, everybody's like, he's the hot new thing, right? Like, I remember when Obama was running for president, everybody loved Obama, kind of thing. Like, they were just, Obama was like the hot new thing. This is David right now. He's the hot new thing. And so people are like, yeah, King Saul's great, but David, he's awesome, kind of thing. And so Saul, now his pride's wounded on it. He no longer likes David, and he's trying to kill David. Matter of fact, there's one time where like David's playing this like LARP or something. I don't know what he's playing, but yeah, whatever that was. But Saul gets mad and he just throws a spear at him. Can you imagine, like, you're just chilling, like, you know, imagine Jeff's on his guitar, right? He's just like coming out, and then like I don't know, let's say Sam gets mad at him and he just like grabs a cup and he throws it at Jeff. Like, can you imagine what that's like? That's awkward right there. So anyways, it's kind of obvious Saul doesn't like David. I mean, he threw some really subtle hints out there, but I think David picked up on it. And now Jonathan is in this pickle, because on one hand, he has his father, who he's supposed to honor and obey, but on the other hand, he has his closest friend's life on the line. What does he do in that? That's an impossible scenario to win in right there with it. And so David is convinced that Saul's going to kill him, and Jonathan's not quite convinced of it yet, right? He's got some loyalty there. It's his father. And so they come up with this, in my opinion, convoluted plan to figure out if Saul actually wants to kill David. I won't go into all the details of it, because you'll be like, what? Where's the logic in that? I don't know either, but these are young men. Young men do stupid things. That's what young men do. But anyways, they finally piece it together, right? They put all the clues together that Saul wants to kill David. And so they meet in the field. A boy shot an arrow. Ignore all that. He leaves. He's not really important to the story. But in 1 Samuel 20, starting in verse 41, says, after the boy had gone, David got up from the south side of the stone and bowed down before Jonathan 3 times with his face to the ground. Then they kissed each other and wept together. Man, when's the last time you just sat down and cried with someone? Just because of what they were going through. Jonathan said to David, "Go in peace, for we have sworn friendship with each other in the name of the Lord, saying, 'The Lord is witness between you and me, and between your descendants and my descendants forever.'" Then David left, and Jonathan went back to town. So I read this, and I was feeling really spiritual, and so I meet with Jeff in the morning. So I go into his house, and I'm like, "Brother, I was really reading about how we need to grow closer together. I feel like we should start kissing each other every time we see each other. Where's your wife, too? I'll kiss her as well, just to show that fellowship." For some reason, he said no. I guess he's not as spiritual as I am on it. But on a serious note, the point that I want to make is be willing to go into someone else's mess and invite them into your own mess, kind of thing. This situation, I can't even imagine how messy this situation is. Because Saul has lost his mind right here. He wants to kill David no matter what. And David's like, bro. David has no intentions of retaliating to Saul. Matter of fact, there's at least 2 times that I saw where David had the opportunity to kill Saul and chose not to. And this is after Saul has tried to kill him multiple times with it. David doesn't want to kill Saul. Jonathan doesn't want the 2 of them to fight. Saul has just gone crazy over this stuff. I don't think he can handle the pressure of being king with it. And so he's out there trying to do this, and it's a messy situation, and Jonathan is stuck right in the middle of it. But you see what they do? There's no answer to this, right? And that's the thing, I do a lot of couples therapy, and they always want the solution. Well, what do we do? What's the thing that we do right now that will fix the problem? And I'm like sitting there, I got my master's degree, I'm looking all professional, I'm like, it's messy. There's no immediate answer to a lot of the situations that people find themselves in with it. The best thing that people can do is just be there for each other and talk about it together and cry together with it and just encourage each other through those difficult times. And that's what you see David and Jonathan doing. These 2 men are walking away, and they know it's going to be a while before they see each other again. And they're both deeply saddened by it. There's another verse that I didn't put into the sermon, but they have another conversation, and they both cry again, but it's specifically said, but David wept even more, kind of thing, because he knew how this was hurting his relationship with his friend with it. And so, another thing that I wanted to mention is at the beginning here, it says that David got up and he bowed down before Jonathan 3 times, right? What's the deal with that? Why would David bow down? Usually that's a sign of obedience towards someone or a sense of lordship, right? Like when people would see an angel, they would fall and bow down. When people around Jesus, they would fall and bow down, right? People don't seem to do that with me for some reason. I don't know why. But I don't think that's what's going on here in this situation. I think what's really going on here is David understands what Jonathan has done for him. Because for Jonathan to be advocating for David is an incredibly dangerous situation. You have a very unstable man who wants to accomplish this insane goal that literally nobody in the kingdom supports with it. And here's the king's own son essentially betraying him. These are high-stake games going on. This is like Game of Thrones level stuff right here. And I'm not even joking. Like if you read this like 1st and 2nd Samuel and 1st and 2nd King, it's incredibly violent. Like horrifically violent with it. Like some of the things that go on in here, I'm like, I don't even know if Game of Thrones could touch this stuff right here. Like this is very bad, dark stuff that's going on here. And it's the time that David and Jonathan live in with it. And so like David knows that Jonathan is literally risking his life every day by advocating for David. And so when he comes here and he's bowing down before Jonathan, I think it's because he appreciates and is so grateful for everything that Jonathan has done for him. Gratitude is one of the most important things that keeps a friendship together with it. Because any relationship is going to have hard times. You're going to have times where you're frustrated with each other, or you go through challenging situations together, or life gets busy and one of you disconnects from the other kind of thing. What keeps people together and what the glue in the relationship is a sense of gratitude and appreciation for each other. And David hasn't lost sight of that with Jonathan. He understands and he appreciates and does not take for granted the things that Jonathan is doing for him with it. And I think that's a really important thing to take away when we talk about having deep relationships with someone. Yeah, someone might do something stupid that you disagree with or that you think might be wrong with it. It happens all the time, and if we're honest, we do it too with it. And yeah, we could be judgmental or critical about that, or we could just choose to forgive them and accept where they're at right now and with it. You know, that's a sense of maturity right there that I think we have to develop. If you want a deep relationship with someone, share your lives with them. Invite them home. I remember one time I was in the campus ministry, and I was over at the minister's house. We were all having dinner. They had like a 4 or 5-year-old at the time. Well, guess what that 4 or 5-year-old decides to do at the dinner table, right, in front of all of these guests? Decides to throw a tantrum and have a meltdown, right? What every parent wants when they have guests over, right? Fun times, right? But I appreciate it. It was actually really interesting for me as a young campus guy to watch how they parented, because I was blown away by it with it. Because if it were me and my household and we did that, oh man, I would feel really bad for any guest that was in our house at that time. It did not end well. But it was so fascinating watching this Christian couple, these parents, go and start parenting their child, disciplining them, and then sitting there and talking with them, and then soothing their child. Like that kind of stuff, I had never seen that before with it. And I think, you think about that, that was like probably 13, 14 years ago, and I still remember that moment. You know, like those, inviting people into your life and letting them see the imperfections and how you handle those imperfections, good and bad, because you're going to handle them poorly too with it, can have such an impact on someone. It did for me. And it's an opportunity to be open about like the reasons why we do what we do and how we respond in a situation, because that's really what sharing our faith is about. You know, like people, you cannot find anyone in, at least in America, that has not heard about Jesus, that has not heard that Jesus died on the cross for our sins and rose again on the third day. That's everywhere with it. What people need to see is how is that manifested in your life with it. They know the knowledge. That knowledge is not new to them in this day and age. The other thing I want to talk about, and I think this is really important, is, and I see this a lot, I'm talking with people and they're talking about like really difficult, heavy stuff and how it affects them, and that when somebody does something, like whether they lost a loved one or have gone through really like painful, like there are people who've had like whole friend groups just reject them one day for stuff that was going on, and those are deep wounds kind of thing. They are scared to like open up and share about that. And one of the most common responses that I hear from people about that is, I don't want to be a burden on anyone. That's a very common response that I hear from people. They're afraid that they're going to be a burden, and that if they become a burden, people won't want to be around them anymore. So they keep this stuff inside. And what I tell them, I don't know if this is the best thing to say or not, it's what feels true to me in the moment talking to them is you have an immature understanding of what love is right there. Because if someone genuinely loves you and cares about you, you're not going to be a burden to them. Matter of fact, they're going to be upset if you don't tell them what's going on, if you don't reach out and share and be vulnerable with them. Being vulnerable is such a huge part of it, and maturing in our understanding of love and recognizing that we're not a burden. If people really love us, we're not going to be a burden to them. So I want to show up, if you can go and put the next slide up here. These two goofballs right here, these two knuckleheads, if you will. The guy wearing the Coca-Cola shirt, his name is Brent Stowers. And the guy next to him with the goofy grin is Justin. And Justin and I lived together for about a year. And for a lot of our campus years, we were pretty close with each other. They are David and Jonathan right there with it. I remember watching their relationship grow. Brent is a former drug dealer. He moved down to Florida because he had made some bad deals and people were looking for him. So his uncle, who still does lead the church down there, he said, "Come here, we'll take care of you," kind of thing. So he brought his pregnant girlfriend, and they came down. They studied the Bible, they built relationships, and now they have like a beautiful family, 3 boys, that kind of stuff. Brent loves to be out in the woods, and he has like chickens and all this kind of stuff with it. Justin just, stuck to him. I don't know what corny phrase you want to use, but it was like glue. Like, Justin loved Brent. He always wanted to be around Brent. He always wanted to do things with Brent, and Brent just welcomed him into the family. Eventually, Justin got married to this really nice lady named Bronwyn. Really funny thing. So Justin is huge country cowboy. He talks like this. He has like a really thick Southern accent. He used to like ride bulls, that kind of stuff with it. So I was there when he and Bronwyn first met each other. And Justin, he was such a flirt in college. He flirted with every girl. And she came in, she was like this like tough country girl kind of thing, had her denim jeans on and whatnot. And he's like, "Well, do you carry a knife?" And then she goes, "Wah!" and carries this out, even huge, bigger knife kind of thing. And he's like, "Whoa," that kind of stuff. Love at first sight between them. But their families are so close even to this day with each other because of the love that those two men have for each other with it. When they've gone through dark times, they were always there for each other. When they go through good times, they celebrate it with each other. Brent eventually moved to, I believe it was Tennessee, if I remember correctly. Could be wrong. And about a year later, Justin followed because I miss him kind of thing. And so he moved up there to be closer with Brent because Brent had a bunch of family in Tennessee with it that he wanted to be close to. But that's the kind of bond. And you think about Brent's kids and Justin has kids growing up together. You know what I mean? What that does for them to have a sense of family and community, all based on this one relationship between two people. We can go to the next slide. All right, so that is me with my goatee that my wife so dearly loves. She hates my goatee. So in the bottom corner right there, we're doing our little chin grab things because we're so cool, right? That's my buddy Adam. Adam, actually, interestingly enough, grew in the same neighborhood as me. Never knew him. Didn't know him at all, kind of thing. It was only when I started going to church, he happened to be going to the same church. And within the first 1 or 2 meetings, we pieced it together that we were practically next door neighbors. We were 3 houses down from each other kind of thing with it. And we connected like that. We did almost everything together. He's a really great man, very spiritual, kind, generous person with it. We would study together. We would cry together. We did everything together, kind of thing. The guy in the top corner, with the goatee going on right there, that is Josh Clements. When I was in community college, somebody introduced me to Josh, and I was like, "Oh, I don't like Josh. Josh is weird with it." But I think it was probably the second time that I met Josh. Josh invited me to church, and I wanted to tell him no because I thought he was weird. But then he told me where the church was at. So keep in mind, I still lived at home at the time, and we were like 30 minutes outside of town, right? There's nothing out there. It's just sticks out there. That's all there is with it. And when he told me where the church was at, I'm like, that is literally 2 minutes from where I live. You know what I mean? It was just wild. Like 2 minutes from where I live. There's a lot of land around Tallahassee. It was 2 minutes from where I lived. So I was like, maybe this is a God thing. Maybe God is trying to tell me that I should go check this place out. So I was like, okay, I'll go, kind of thing. And those two men are probably some of the closest relationships that I've had in my walk. I know that if I were to go down there right now, we would pick back up right where we left off. I would always be welcomed by those two men. Josh actually baptized me with it, and he was part of the studies that I went through with it. I remember we were roommates as well for about 2 years, and I just remember one night I was dealing with depression at the time and just crying, and Josh was there holding me, kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, those are deep relationships right there. Those are the ones that are like, oh, you know, you get, oh, you don't want to cry, but you're like, oh, you know what I mean? Kind of thing. It's important relationships. I would be devastated if I were to lose either one of those men right there with it. But let's switch to the next scripture. This is the second to last one right here, so just bear with me on it. So Saul and Jonathan died. They die in a battle against the Philistines with it. David finds out he is heartbroken by it. And he writes this. He writes about both of them. Even though Saul was trying to kill him, he still held Saul in high regard. And he said, "How the mighty have fallen in battle. Jonathan lies slain on your heights. I grieve for you, Jonathan, my brother. You were very dear to me. Your love for me was wonderful, more wonderful than that of women." I just think about that, like, that kind of level of intimacy right there. It always encourages me when I hear men talking about being intimate with each other. Because I feel like in society, women are kind of encouraged to be intimate. Men typically aren't encouraged to be intimate with each other, right? We give each other fist bumps, or we'll do the 1-2 tap, you know what I mean? And then release, like, huh, 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 you know, like that kind of stuff with it. Like, we're uncomfortable with being intimate with each other and having intimate relationships with each other with it. But you can clearly see here how much Jonathan meant to David. And my point in this one is, and you're going to think this is a terrible point, but you will get hurt. If you invest in a relationship, it is only a matter of time before you get hurt in that relationship. Whether it was something that your friend did to you or whether it was something that happened to your friend, kind of thing. You will get hurt in the relationship. And then you might be asking, well, thanks for that. You just undid your whole sermon right there. You're welcome. But let me ask you this. Why is it worth then, knowing that you're going to get hurt in the relationship, why is it worth pursuing the relationships with it? I can tell you that I have been hurt both in this church and in the church that I was spiritually raised in with it by men that I really appreciated and respected in life. And it was very painful times that left me in tears with it. It happens with it. And I don't want to go through that. And I don't think any of you guys want to go through it. So why do we do it? Why do we take the risks with it? And for me, it goes back to this verse. If you can switch to the verse, 1 John 4, verse 7. It says, "Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God." Amen. Kind of thing. And I think about that, and I think about the love that God has for me, and I think about the kind of man that I am, and I think about all the ways that I have sinned before God, actively gone against his will, taken advantage of his grace and his mercy, kind of thing. And I think to myself, who am I to deny somebody else what I've been given? This sense of grace and mercy and knowing that I can always be welcomed back by him, kind of thing. Yeah, it hurts. It hurts God every day when he sees. I think about, like, in Genesis 5, God talks about, when with the whole flood, he wanted to wipe everyone out because men's heart were just filled with violence and it grieved him, kind of thing. You even look at this whole, like, time period with David and Jonathan and everything that's going on. Incredibly violent time period. Men have not changed between that point where God wanted to just wipe the world and the world that David is living in. Still incredibly violent world right there with it. God hasn't changed. And I think it grieves God every day to watch people hurting and suffering and abusing each other. You know what I mean? With it. Yet he still chooses to love us. He still chooses to forgive us. And he still desires to have a relationship with us. And we can't lose sight of that, because if we do, we will become isolated. We will become cut off from each other, and we won't have anything to do with each other. Again, it goes back to maturing in our love. But it starts with maturing in our love for God and understanding God's love for us with it. Interestingly enough, when David found out about Jonathan's death, the old phrase, "don't kill the messenger," he killed the messenger on that. The story was Saul knew he was losing, so he essentially threw himself on a sword, but he was dying very slowly, kind of thing. And this guy walks by, and he does a mercy killing on Saul. And he tells David about it. And David's like, "You just killed the Lord's anointed." And he kills him right there on the spot, kind of thing. When we're hurting, we want to lash out at the people around us, kind of thing. Or we even want to lash out at ourselves because of the pain that we're going through with it. And what we really need at that time is to stop and reflect on why we're hurting and reach out and connect with people. David, actually, before he ascended on the throne, he ascends in the second chapter of 2 Samuel. It says that time had passed before he did that. And I think it was because of this, about losing Jonathan with it. He was grieving, and he needed time to recover from that. And when you get hurt, it's okay to take time to recover from that. But I also encourage you not to give up on loving people, because I also think about, we get hurt, and I've been hurt before, but I think, what would I have lost if I just chose not to love and chose not to invest in relationships with it? I honestly think I would have lost a lot more than I would have gained by that. Can't live in fear, right, with each other. Being love is being courageous with each other. The other interesting thing too, right, because their relationship is essentially over, but not really with it. If you go back to 1 Samuel 20 and verse 42, Jonathan makes an oath for David, and he says, essentially, your children and my children will always be friends, kind of thing. Jonathan dies. He leaves behind a 5-year-old son with him. His name is a very long word, but fortunately he goes by the nickname Micah, so we're going to call him Micah. When Jonathan dies, his mother panics and they flee, but she accidentally drops Micah and hurts him. I don't know exactly what, but it says he's no longer able to walk after that. So he's a disabled person living in essentially medieval times. Can't be easy, right? There's no wheelchairs, there's no accessory ramps, there's no automatic sliding doors. I don't know if you look at castles, but there are a lot of stairs in castles. So I can only imagine how hard his life was, right? But years later, David is firmly established his kingdom and has been king for a while, he decides that he's going to reach out and find the descendants of Saul, and he finds Jonathan's son. And he invites his son to go live with him, kind of thing. And I think that's cool because you just see the power of love. They couldn't have known that, right? This disabled young man going through all of this hardship, lost his father when he was 5. And now David's like, no, I want to take care of you. You're going to be in my household. You're going to be with my family, kind of thing. And David's family isn't perfect either. There's a lot of mess in David's family. So I don't know how much of a blessing it was for Micah to be around that. But still, that heart and that intention of like, no, this is my best friend's son right there. He stays with me, kind of thing. Like that heart, you don't know the impact that your relationships could have, right? Like you think about Brent and Justin, when they were becoming friends, they weren't thinking about how their children were going to be raised up together and how they were going to become friends with it. They were just investing and enjoying the relationship with each other. And so it ripples, it has impact, it reaches out into the community with it. So, amen. Thank you guys for listening to me. I appreciate you guys so much with it. I know it's cold and slippery out there, so I encourage you all to be safe. And please be praying for Nicole and her family as she goes through a very difficult time right now. So with that, we will go ahead and close out with a song, right? And church will be dismissed. Thank you, guys.